upset. He's upset because his hometown was attacked. Nobody's doing anything about it right now. Frank felt something needed to be done.
Somebody shot your brother? So what is the kind of stuff? He's from University. The black pickup truck, that's it, I believe.
On 9/11, the unthinkable happened when America was attacked on her own shores. Almost 3,000 people died that day. As a nation, we were unmoored. Americans dealt with their anger and their sadness at the terrorist attack in different ways. In Mesa, Arizona, Frank Roque took his anger out on Balbir Singh Sodhi. Sodhi was a gas station owner who came to the U.S. not from an Arab or Muslim nation, but from India. And he came to pursue the American dream. But that dream ended when he was murdered in broad daylight 4 days after 9/11.
Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts.
I mean, this was true evidence of the anger that some people felt because of 9/11 towards a certain segment of this community.
You know, anybody who lived that moment understands how inflamed passions were following 9/11, but Frank took it, yeah, I think you could say a bit too far.
Roque picked out Balbir Singh Sodhi as a scapegoat. He picked him out as a scapegoat and he executed him.
I was seeing the second one. Seeing the second one, you know, it's bad enough to see the first one. And then seeing the second one, slam that building, and then seeing both those buildings collapse like that, it saddened me, it angered me.
Balbir Singh Sodhi was an immigrant from the Punjab region of India. We're talking northern India. And he was one of 3 brothers who immigrated from India.
We choose to come to America because this country gives you freedom of religion. And if you're hardworking, you can fulfill your dream.
Balbir Sodhi was an owner of the Chevron convenience mart there at 80th Street and University in Mesa. We got notified of a shooting. What happened was a vehicle pulled up. Gunshots were shot from the vehicle. The vehicle was a black pickup truck, a smaller pickup truck with chrome fender lips.
Balbir was out in the garden of his convenience store. Frank Roque pulled his pickup truck in that very garden, rolled down the window and cracked off about a half dozen shots at Balbir and killed him right there.
Another shooting occurred shortly thereafter, and it occurred at a residence. It was sort of like a drive-by shooting. A car drove up, same description of vehicle, fired at the house. The owners of the house, after the shooting had gone outside, and they heard some shots being fired. Those shots were being fired at a convenience store at Val Vista and Broadway. What happened was a similar vehicle fired from the vehicle into the convenience store.
I was embarrassed for Arizona. I thought, this is another black mark on Arizona, and I think a lot of people took it that way.
The jury is present, the lawyers are present, and Mr. Roque is present. The state has charged the defendant with 1 count of first-degree murder, 3 counts of drive-by shooting, 1 count of attempted first-degree murder, and 1 count of endangerment.
This case really is about a clash of 2 cultures. It's about a lot of other things, but it is essentially a clash of different cultures that came to a very deadly end. This was, in part, a result of September 11th, but the evidence will show that the murder of Mr. Sodhi ran much deeper than that. The attempted murder of Anwar Khalil from Pakistan ran much deeper than that. The shooting at the Sahak residence, which the defendant had sold to that family in 1998, ran much deeper than that.
You don't look to me to be somebody that's a cold-blooded individual that's going to go out for no reason at all and just shoot people. You know, I think things have happened over the last week that anybody that's a patriot would be angry about.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Frank Roque is mentally ill. He no longer hears the voices in his head that he heard in September of 2001. Those voices have now been stilled. They've been stilled because he's on medication. Prior to September 11, 2001, there is no history of bigotry or prejudice on the part of Frank Roque against other races or religions.
The entire point for Dan Patterson and Bob Stein, who were the defense attorneys, was to save Frank Roque's life, to convince the jurors that he was out of his mind, that he was consumed with rage, and that he had a psychotic episode.
Frank wasn't on medication September 15, 2001, because he didn't know he was mentally ill.
In Arizona, in order to be able to use the insanity defense, you need to show that you did not know that when you committed the act that it was wrong.
Did he say anything to you that indicated that he had already done something?
I think he shot somebody.
It was clear that Frank Roque was guilty. The question was, would his sentence be life in prison or the death penalty? His lawyers said that Frank was insane at the time of the shooting, that mental illness ran in his family, that he was known to have more than a few beers, and that he heard voices. But at the end of the trial, would all of the evidence point to a premeditated murder or a psychotic break?
I wrote in a column a line that in these days that will live in infamy comes an act of idiocy. That while some people were lining up to donate blood, this guy decides to go shoot someone in the head because he's wearing a turban.
I was in front of him, down below, showing him where the water was leaking.
La otra palabra que escuché que dijo, lo único que yo escuché que dijo, no me mates.
The word that I heard, well, the only words I heard him say were, don't kill me.
Did you hear any gunshots?
Yes, right away. He started firing at him right away.
Did you hear a gunshot?
I heard bang, bang, bang. And there was a white Bronco in my view at that point. I heard shots until I seen Mr. Balbier hit the ground.
You heard the gunshots, but you didn't see the gun discharged, correct?
No, I didn't.
All right, and then you're also trying to dial 911?
And shifting gears and trying to keep an eye on him.
So where's the guy that took off? He took off down east on University. East on University, what color pickup? There's a black pickup truck, I think, right there. Black pickup truck? That's it, I believe. That's it? I believe that's your license plate? No, we didn't.
Did there come a time when you thought that he was having problems that could have benefited from professional intervention?
A couple of times.
Okay.
I've said something to him.
All right. Frank has an alcohol problem, doesn't he?
I've never seen him drunk. I know that he drinks.
You have never seen him drunk. He's told you in the past that he has a drinking problem, hasn't he?
Yes, he has.
In fact, he's told you that he's an alcoholic, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
All right, now during the that week after September 11th, you heard your father make some threats, correct?
Yeah.
Do you recall him using a term like turban head or rag head?
No, I don't. I'm positive.
You're positive he never said that?
Not to me.
But you said that you heard him make some threats, correct?
Yes. The same threat. One threat.
One of those was, we need to go to Afghanistan and drop some bombs, right?
You need to go bomb Afghanistan. Bomb them all.
All right.
You know, nobody thinks that their dad's going to go and commit this crime. Nobody thinks that. And I kind of felt sorry for him. I almost felt like they were victims too of his acts.
You said he expressed his intense anger. Can you recall some of the words that he used?
Yes, I can. He had stated that all those Middle Easterners should die, their kids should die, and our government should send them back to their country. They have no right to be here.
And prior to September 11, 2001, you'd never heard Mr. Roque make a derogatory or racist remark, correct?
Not towards anybody in particular, because that is true.
All right.
During the day on September the 11th, Mr. Roque say anything, make any statements or comments that caught your attention?
The exact words which really stuck in my head were, I hate those and he said, I think we should kill them all. And he said, I think we should kill their children too. And I remember those words distinctively because it kind of stuck in my head as being pretty extreme.
On that day, on September 11th, did Mr. Roque mention anything to you about having a problem with a particular person?
Yeah.
Well, would you tell us about that? What did he say?
He just said he had an altercation at a gas station, and you know, the way he was explained it was, you know, later it was probably you know, an Indian or something like that.
Did he say anything to you about what he might have done or what he was going to do?
Well, he talked about getting his gun. I said, what are you going to do? You don't want to do anything with that. He said, well, somebody's got to do something.
Did he say anything to you that indicated that he had already done something?
He just, I think he shot somebody.
He's home, and I'm afraid to go home. He's drunk, and he's hold on, man. We got somebody right here.
What did she say to you that made you advise her to call the police?
By the time I talked to her, I had saw what had happened on the news, and I was worried that my brother was going to hurt himself or hurt her. I told her, don't say anything to him, just get the kids, get in the car, and go call the police and let them know that he's at the house. Because by that time, I knew that the police were looking for him.
It was absolutely a hate crime. He was shot because he wore a turban. He was shot because Frank Roque thought he was an Arab. Frank Roque also fired at 2 other targets that he perceived as being Arab. So, absolutely, this was a hate crime.
And did he advise you about your life?
All the time. Means if he need, sorry.
September 15th, 2001 started like most other days for Balbir Singh Sodhi. He went to work at his gas station in Mesa, Arizona. But everything had changed. 4 days earlier, thousands of Americans had died in a terrorist attack. Fear and anger were running high towards the Islamic terrorists behind the tragedy. And frankly, anyone who looked like them, too. Balbir was Indian. His country and his religion were unconnected to the attacks. And he refused to be motivated by fear. He loved his customers and his community, and he felt they loved him back. All except for one, Frank Roque.
He called me 30 minutes before his death. And he said, Rana, could you bring some flag, American flag for my store? Because I couldn't find in East Valley area.
He had a feeling, you know, because of the turban, the appearance, somebody can get hurt. And he was worried about me. In fact, he told me, Rana, I don't want you to go to work because you wearing turban and I don't want you to go to work. And I say, where are you? Then he said, I'm working. My neighborhood is beautiful and all the people there know me and they love me and I have a zero problem.
We lost our brother I don't know how we stop those hate crime against different religion, different people.
I never think about before 9/11, there's hate exist in our country. After 9/11, I see the hate come out to the different culture, different people.
I was very close to him, actually. He was like everything to me. My father, my friend. And I can talk with him anytime for anything. And he calls me every day.
And did he advise you about your life?
All the time. Means if he need, we share each other every time. Like we should do this next, we should do next, and we had a lot of dreams.
I was so sad because we flew from India because the hate, and we want to have a better life and fulfill our dream. I lost my brother with those things.
During that day, did Frank give you a phone call?
Yeah, yes, I spoke with him. Said something about God. He was ranting and raving. I didn't understand a lot of the things that he was saying. It made no sense. And I got really scared. I called them a Mesa Police Department.
Frank's brother called and said, there's something going on. My brother's got on the phone. I'm worried about him. I'm worried about my brother. Well, what kind of vehicle does he drive? He drives a black pickup truck. Okay, so now we know it's the same vehicle that was used in those crimes.
In your opinion, Doctor, which of the gunshot wounds caused the death of Mr. Sodi? Is there one?
There's actually 2 out of the 5. What I arbitrarily called gunshot wound number 1, that one was severe. The other wound, because there were 2 of them, was what I arbitrarily called gunshot wound number 4. It hit a large blood vessel that branches off of the aorta. The cause of death was multiple gunshot wounds.
Describe the weapon, please.
This is a Smith & Wesson 380 semi-automatic firearm.
When you were asked to examine this weapon, did you make note of whether it had a magazine?
It did, in fact, have a magazine along with it.
Any live rounds in the magazine?
No, it was empty.
What we had learned was he had gone off to stop at a bar, local bar, and he was doing some boisterous yelling and talking about the events of 9/11 because, you know, it was a tumultuous time. But he was so aggressive in using terms like towelhead and those types of terms. And he was using those terms in such a way to even make the bar patrons uncomfortable.
What I'd like for you to do is point out to us where the defendant is at this point.
This is the front door. He just walked in and he's standing in this area right here.
We were able to find out where Frank lived. We were able to go there, make contact with him, and then go ahead and make an arrest. A search warrant was effected. In that search warrant, 2 guns were recovered. The shell casings were later matched from the gun that were found in the car. So his vehicle was found, guns were found. Our lab was able to match that stuff up. In fact, that same night.
I didn't do these 3 things you're talking about, and I damn sure ain't gonna admit to something I didn't do.
You know, Frank, we can dance around this all night long. But the bottom line is you're going to be arrested for those shootings tonight.
Where was Mr. Roque when you arrived at the residence?
He was basically taken into custody in the vicinity of the driveway.
Did you overhear him say anything?
He had basically stated that I'm a patriot, an American, I'm a damn American.
Val Beer just happened to be standing there in front of his gas station, and he made a convenient target. It's a good lesson in today's world that you know, singling out people as scapegoats is moronic. It's not American. If somebody thinks they're a patriot for doing that, they're wrong.
Frank was the subject. The defendant was making statements about these people and how he was from New York, or he had family from New York, and the attack basically was on all his brothers and sisters.
Did he say anything about what ought to happen to them? Or?
he was making statements that if one of these people were sitting across from him, he'd cut their throat.
Describe just his general, his demeanor, his attitude during the ride to the Mesa Police Department.
Best way I could describe it is just he was agitated.
What did he say?
I remember him calling us worms as we were en route to the police station. He called us.
I think he knew he was caught. I think he knew that that was the last time he was going to be in his house.
You knew he had been arrested, correct?
Yes.
And you knew what for?
Yes.
Your brother actually said to you, they kept grilling me yesterday, and I just, they tried to get me to admit it, and I wouldn't.
Yes.
Right? And he said, I don't know, I don't think I'll ever make it out of this, right?
Yes.
And your response was, doesn't look good, correct?
Yes.
And then you said, so keep your mouth shut, correct?
Yes.
Did you get I'm not gonna keep going on and on with this. I already told you I have nothing to do with this. You want to keep like, no, I'm not
Your
denying.
denials aren't gonna change my mind, and they're
That's
not changing
fine.
anything.
They don't have to change your mind. I'm telling
That's why
you
I'm
the truth.
trying to understand.
I'm telling you the truth, whether you want to believe me or not.
Balbir Singh Sodhi's gas station was just the first stop on Frank Roque's hate-filled shooting spree the afternoon of September 15th, 2001. His next stop would be his former home, which 3 years earlier he had sold to the Sahak family, who had come to America from Afghanistan. Ahmed Sahak and his wife were at their front door getting ready to leave when Frank Roque drove by.
Do you recall any discussions that you might have had with him regarding where you were from?
Yeah, he did ask us where we were from, and I told him Afghanistan.
So you purchased the home, I think you said in about 1998?
That's correct.
Were you still living in that home on September 15th, 2001?
Yes, I was.
About 2:30, 2:45 in the afternoon, were you about to leave your home?
Yes, I was.
When you got to the front door, did something happen? Did you hear something?
I was just barely holding on to the door as I was twisting it and turning it, opening the door. I heard about 3 loud shots, gunshots.
When you looked outside, what could you see?
I saw a dark color pickup truck with a person in it and putting away his weapon.
This family also thought that maybe he was just upset because it was a nice house and for whatever reason he felt he had to sell it. They thought that it was not retaliation that he sold his house off to someone from Afghanistan. I thought maybe they just don't want to think that.
We're looking at a series of photographs of 6 males, correct?
Yes.
3 on top of the other.
Yes.
Correct? And did Mr. Sahak identify any of those photographs as being the person he had seen with a gun outside of his house that day?
Yes.
Which one?
It was the photograph in position number 5, which is the middle one on the bottom.
Okay. And that was that's a photograph of whom?
Mr. Roque.
Were you aware at the time you showed the photographic array to Mr. Sahak that he had had prior contact with Mr. Roque?
No.
In searching for any potential damage to the outside structure of the home, did you see any?
Yes, I did. I saw what looked like a gunshot strike actually on one of the bricks near the front door. And then later on, it was actually found a hole that went through one of the shingles on the roof.
None of the windows were shot or broken by a discharged projectile, correct?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Okay. And none of the bullets went into the living area of this particular home. Is that a fair statement?
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
At some point, did you hear anything unusual?
Yeah, at one point, it's like I heard glass or something breaking.
And What did you see when you got out there?
It was just Anwar, and he was just like screaming. He was just like crying a little bit. He was just like, oh my God, oh thank you, Lord.
Piece of the light cover in the ceiling, I guess broke and got me in the back. So I just put my head down, and as I put my head down, the shooting stopped. And as the shooting stopped, I turned my head out the window to look, and I seen a black S10 Chevy truck. I was afraid to go home that night.
Were you struck by any of the bullets?
No, sir. At the time of the shooting, I thought I did get shot with one of the bullets, but it was a piece of glass that dropped from the ceiling on my back.
All right. You sustained no bullet wound or bullet injury as a result of the shooting, correct?
No, thank God.
I went into the convenience store owned by a Lebanese gentleman who pointed out the U.S. flag that was hanging in his store, and he said, that just didn't go up after 9/11. That's been up since I opened this place. He was very firm about his love of America and how much of a patriot he was, even in the face of this crime.
Did you see someone in the truck?
Yes.
Describe what you saw.
I saw a gentleman sitting in the truck.
And what happened?
He sat there for a few minutes, and then I saw him raise his arm, and then the shots went off.
Now, to your knowledge, was anybody struck by either a projectile or a fragment inside the mobile that day?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
If you had been the clerk inside of this store when these shots were fired, looking at where you found the fragments and where the bullet holes were, do you feel that your life would have been in danger?
Yes.
My understanding is that was the first racially motivated killing following 9/11. There would be more, but that was the first. Suddenly we had this obvious hate crime. Frank really wasn't capable or smart enough to make a clean getaway and get away. He was in custody pretty quick.
I want to know why, what's this all about?
Frank, we've been investigating these 3 separate shooting incidents that occurred today, okay? 3 separate ones, and I know for a fact, there is no doubt in my mind that you are the one involved in those shootings and you're the one that done those shootings. Hang on a second, hang on a second. I know that for a fact. We've already been investigating this all night, so just listen to what I have to say, because I think it's important for you to understand. Hang on a second.
The concerning part to me was an innocent person would almost be pleading with me to get me to believe them. They're begging me to believe them. There's almost tears coming out of their eyes that I didn't have anything to do with this. And he was defiant. He was trying to convince me that almost like, hey, I'm an American. I'm right.
Is Frank a cold-blooded individual driving down the street? No. Has he done this before? No. You've got a clean record, my friend. We already know for a fact that you did it.
Did what?
I told you. What am I investigating? 3 separate shootings. I told you.
And you're trying to say I did 3 separate shootings?
Yes.
No, man, you're wrong.
In his initial interrogation, he seems pretty lucid to the extent, a man who had just committed these kinds of acts, but he seems to present pretty well and doesn't seem to be off the rails at that point.
Did you get
I'm not going to keep going on and on with this. I already told you I have nothing to do with this. You want to keep like, no, I'm not
Your
denying.
denials aren't going to change my mind, and they're
That's
not changing
fine.
anybody's.
They don't have to change your mind. I'm telling you the
That's why
truth.
I'm trying to understand.
I'm telling you the truth, whether you want to believe me or not.
I was disappointed in myself because I was hoping to get him to tell me that he did it and why. You know what I mean? Give me the why, and he wouldn't do that.
I find it so far-fetched that you could possibly say that when I know that I didn't do this.
It was interesting talking to the jurors after the trial, and they said that it was the interview that kind of helped convince them to convict him.
How do you come to that conclusion, that his intent was to shoot the deceased?
He told me that he saw a man in a turban and he reached for his gun.
Proving that Frank Roque was insane during his shooting spree could spare his life. And there was no shortage of experts who would testify at the trial, but proving someone is insane is no small feat, especially someone who seemed fairly lucid during his police interrogation, who seemed to have planned the shootings, and who seemed to express anger towards people who looked Middle Eastern. But is it possible to prove someone is insane the moment he pulls the trigger?
I think in this case, the defense had few options. You had someone who was heard in a bar talking badly about people wearing towels on their head, and who bragged at a bar about, you're gonna see me on TV, you're gonna see me retaliate for 9/11 on television later.
People have identified you.
Nobody identified me because I didn't do nothing.
People have got the license plate off your truck. You've got empty casings in your vehicle that are going to match up to the ones at the scene. One of the shootings happened in a house that you sold the house to the guy.
You know, Frank, I don't think came across as any sort of intellectual giant, so it was easy to, I think, for the defense to say he's got diminished capacity, and so Vince had to overcome that, you know.
He claimed to have some of the symptoms indicated on the test. In particular, he claimed to have heard voices in the past. When I said, do you hear voices? He said no, but he said, I have in the past.
What's his overall IQ? Is it the number that maybe we might be familiar with?
Overall, his IQ is 80. I don't think he was capable of having an awareness of right and wrong in the objective outside world. I think he thought he was doing what he had to do, and the rest of the world had become irrelevant.
Frank clearly had an established history, familial history, I believe, of mental illness. I believe his mother was schizophrenic, and that they were able to establish that he had a rather low IQ, meaning that he was not the smartest guy in the world. Again, I would argue a belly full of beer and a heart full of hatred, that's pretty volatile stuff.
Did you discover with Frank Roque anything that led you to believe that he was malingering?
No, not at all.
Okay. Did you believe he was being truthful with you when he recited the symptoms that he recited to you?
Yes.
With respect to Mr. Roque, his behavior was quite unusual. He is essentially saying that his insanity was temporary and that it's not something that is a part of his normal condition.
What is your opinion then with regard to his ability to appreciate the wrongfulness of his conduct on September 15, 2001, specifically the period that afternoon from, say, 2:40 to 3:05 or 6?
Well, to a medical degree of certainty, meaning from my perspective as a psychiatrist, he met the criteria that indicate that he, at the time that he committed that, was not able to discern the legal wrongfulness of his actions.
He said to you, I believe, at least your recollection is that he said to you, he heard a voice say, kill the, is it the devil or the devils?
And there were two different incidents, and one was plural and one, I think, was singular.
Okay, and did he tell you whether this voice that he was hearing told him who the devils were?
No.
At least on the evening of September 15th, it would be your opinion that he knew right from wrong, correct?
Yes. Well, and on the issues at hand, yes.
He at least knew that society thought it was wrong.
Absolutely.
And that it was against the law.
Absolutely.
But you're not able to tell us on the 15th of September when that recognition began.
No.
The idea that somebody is quote unquote crazy doesn't necessarily give you information about their likelihood or the extent to which they are guilty of a particular crime.
He's a responsible person. He worked for a well-known company in the world. And also, he killed my brother, and he wanted to kill all other Muslim community people. So there's no excuse on that. And it is make very clear thing, he planned thing to do those things.
The way this looks is that this was a symptom that was made up to cover for the true motivation of the crime, that it wasn't well thought out, In fact, he gave about 5 different explanations, which is highly suspect in forensic psychiatry.
Dr. Shalley, in your opinion, does Mr. Roque have a reason to fake mental illness in this case?
Yes?
And it is your opinion that the defendant was faking mental illness?
Yes.
And that is also your final opinion that he was sane at the time he committed these crimes, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
How do you come to that conclusion, that his intent was to shoot the deceased?
He told me that he saw a man in a turban and he reached for his gun.
All I remember is these dueling opinions of his mental health. I do remember that there was no real diagnosis at any point that he was mentally ill. It was sort of implied that it was untreated mental illness, which of course is very, very common, and that would still be true to this day.
America does not execute the mentally ill citizens in its community. Frank Roque is mentally ill.
In Arizona, a capital trial has 3 phases: guilt, mitigation, and sentencing. And at the end of this trial, the jury would have to decide if Frank Roque would spend the rest of his life in prison or be put to death. Frank's lawyers were down to their last few opportunities to convince this jury to let him live.
Clearly, there was lunacy at work on a grand scale on September 11, 2001. There was also lunacy at work on September 15, 2001, here in the city of Mesa on a much smaller scale. That day, September 11, 2001, so overwhelmed him that Frank Roque could no longer cope with the mental illness that was just bubbling beneath the surface of his being.
You don't wake up on September 11th and see what we all saw on TV and suddenly become a racist. You've been one for a long time. It's not mental illness, ladies and gentlemen. It is anger. It is revenge. It is hatred. But it certainly isn't mental illness.
Has the jury reached a verdict?
As to count 1, we, the jury, do find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder. As to count 2, guilty. Count 3, guilty. To count 4, guilty. Count 5, guilty. Count 6, guilty. Is this your true verdict? So say you won in all?
Yes. They did not buy the insanity defense. He was found guilty of first-degree murder. The jury was not influenced very much by the claims that he was mentally ill.
In this country, I see it, the justice system, and I feel so proud. Even I lost my brother, justice served.
We start today with the fact that not every first-degree murder conviction results in the imposition of the death penalty. If that were the case, your verdicts would have been a done deal, okay? That's not the case in Arizona. You can't consider the fact that he's been called a racist who went on a rage on September 15, 2001. There are no factors that exist in this case that set it apart and justify the execution of Frank Roque. It's just not here.
Has the jury reached a verdict?
It's my job now to show you why life in prison is a significant, substantial, and satisfactory punishment for the crime he committed. Did you find any evidence of malingering in Mr. Roque's case?
I did not. I think a big issue for the jury is, did he hear the voice or not?
For the jury to get to the point where they're excusing behavior because of mental illness, they have to be convinced that the person really didn't know what they were doing. In this case, not only did you have the fatal shooting, but you had 2 other shooting incidents. The jury might have thought that's too much to think this person just snapped.
Can you describe for the jury how the death, the murder of Balbier affected his widow?
It's very much affected to everybody in the family also.
and it's very, very painful. I cry often. I could not sleep at night sometimes. So there's a big picture of my dad in my home. I could not stare on that. When I pass through, I have to.
Has the defendant changed his mind with respect to allocuting to the jury, Mr. Patterson?
He has not changed his mind. He would still wish not to make a statement.
Okay, thank you. This is the time for the Phase 3 final arguments.
America does not execute the mentally ill citizens in its community. Frank Roque is mentally ill.
Wouldn't it have been nice if Mr. Roque had not condemned Mr. Sodi to death without the benefit of a trial?
Has the jury reached a verdict?
Yes, we have. As to count 1, we, the jury, upon our oaths, do not find that there is mitigation that is sufficiently substantial to call for leniency, and we find that the death is the appropriate sentence. Is this your true verdict, so say you one and all?
Yes. Well, I think they had a very, very difficult case. I remember one of the attorneys telling me, Jim, we may have lost today, but we're gonna win on appeal. And he was right.
So with respect to the death penalty, one interesting thing about it is Mr. Roque's IQ. He was originally sentenced to the death penalty, but on appeal, the court ultimately said that it was not the set of circumstances that would warrant the death penalty. So instead, he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole.
I spoke with Frank Roque about 5 years back.
The only thing I could say is I'm sorry for what happened. One day when I go to heaven to be judged by God, I will ask to see your brother, and I will ask him for forgiveness.
We already forgave you. When the jury find you a death penalty, I told the media, I don't want to take his life. This is not my Sikh religion teach me to taking somebody's life. His death changed my life. His death changed so many people's life. The first time he apologized, and I feel like he really did apologize. And I believe it, forgiveness is a big thing. None of the human in this world is perfect. My family, myself, we feel it. We are in a great country and we get justice served.
This is something that's always impressed me about Rana Singh Sodi and the Singh Sodi family in general, that there was never any vengeance at all. They wanted punishment, they wanted accountability, but they did not want vengeance, and that's a different thing.
The Arizona Supreme Court commuted his death sentence in 2006. But Frank Roque will never leave prison. He's currently serving life with no possibility for parole for the murder of Balbir Singh Sodi. I'm Ashley Banfield. Thanks for watching.